My parents stole my money to buy my sister a car. What happened next changed my entire life. That sinking feeling in your gut when you know something's terribly wrong? I felt it standing in Mercy Hospital's lobby at 8 a.m. after driving a borrowed Honda Civic through morning traffic. The reception nurse kept typing, searching through patient records while I fidgeted with my coffee-stained work shirt. "I'm sorry, sir. There's no Jennifer Porter or Jennifer Collins admitted here in the last 3 days. Not in trauma, not in surgery, not anywhere." My phone buzzed. A notification from my bank app. Transfer of $22,000 completed successfully. I checked 3 other hospitals within a 30-mile radius. Same result. No record of my sister's supposed life-threatening accident. No emergency spinal surgery. No specialist flown in from Cleveland. Driving toward my parents' suburban home, I rehearsed what I'd say. Maybe there was a mix-up. Maybe they took her to a private clinic. Maybe the pristine white BMW X3 with temporary dealer plates pulling out of their driveway killed all my maybes. Behind the wheel sat my sister Jen, the same sister who my father claimed was unconscious after flipping her car several times on Interstate 65. The sister whose spine needed immediate surgery, or she might never walk again. The sister for whom I had just emptied my entire wedding savings account. Our eyes met through the windshield. Her face transformed from joy to shock to horror in 3 seconds flat. She slammed on the brakes. In the back seat, I glimpsed my parents. 36 hours earlier, everything had been perfect. Caitlin and I were in our rented 2-bedroom apartment, reviewing wedding venue options on her laptop. The $24,500 in our joint savings account represented 4 years of careful budgeting. Skipped vacations, packed lunches, and weekend side gigs. As a senior mechanic at Auto Solutions, I made decent money, $55,000, and Kate's accounting job at Midwest Logistics brought in similar. We weren't rich, but we were building something real together. I still remember the Excel spreadsheet on her screen. $15,000 for the wedding, modest venue, 75 guests, and the remaining $9,500 as down payment on a starter home in the suburbs, all set for June next year. Then my phone rang. Dad never called after 9 p.m. His voice sounded different, shaky, panicked. He explained through tears how Jen had been in a terrible accident on her way home from work, how her car rolled multiple times, how she was in Mercy Hospital, unconscious, with the doctor saying her spine was severely damaged, how a specialist from Cleveland could perform emergency surgery, but they needed $22,000 by midnight because insurance won't cover experimental procedures. My body went cold. I put the phone on speaker so Kate could hear. "Mike, you know we wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death," Dad pleaded. She might never walk again without this surgery. I wanted to drive to the hospital immediately, but my truck was in the shop with a broken timing belt. It was nearly 10 p.m. after a 14-hour shift. I was exhausted, running on fumes and gas station coffee. "Transfer the money to our account," Dad instructed. "The hospital needs cash, and I'm heading to the ATM now. There's no time to waste." Something felt off about that request, but Jen and I had never been close. She was a golden child, BMW sales executive with designer clothes and a condo in the trendy part of town. I was just a blue-collar brother who settled for being a mechanic, but this was beyond our differences. This was her life. Kate squeezed my hand. "If it's for Jen's life, we'll figure out the wedding later," she whispered. I initiated the transfer, $22,000 from our joint account to my parents' checking account. For years of dreams, gone in a single transaction, back to that BMW pulling out of my parents' driveway. I blocked the street with my borrowed Civic. Jen stopped, her perfectly manicured hand still on the wheel. No neck brace, no hospital gown. Just her usual business casual, and not a scratch on her. The next 30 minutes in my parents' living room were surreal. It was an investment in Jen's career, my mother explained. Serving coffee like this was a normal Sunday visit. She needed to project the right image to her high-end clients. Dad at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Son, you know we wouldn't have asked if it wasn't important." Jen was going to lose that promotion if she kept showing up in her old Hyundai. You lied about an accident? About surgery? About her being paralyzed? My voice didn't sound like my own. Jen rolled her eyes. Don't be so dramatic, Mike. You're young, you'll earn it back. I needed this car now. It's business. I recorded the entire conversation on my phone. Not as some master plan, just pure instinct. Maybe part of me knew Kate wouldn't believe it otherwise. That night, I returned to our apartment around midnight. Kate was waiting up, eyes red from worry. How's Jen? Why didn't you call? Is she going to be okay? Wordlessly, I showed her the video. Her face as she watched my family casually justify their fraud was heartbreaking. When the video ended, she just stared at the wedding venue still open on her laptop. 4 years, Mike. 4 years of saving every dollar. Her voice was hollow. And they just took it for a car. Morning came. I dragged myself home after an overnight shift to find half of our closet empty and Kate nowhere in sight. She left her key and half of next month's rent in cash on the kitchen counter. Her note wasn't angry or accusatory. I need time to think. This isn't about the money or about you. It's about what kind of family we'd be joining. I love you, but I can't build a life with someone whose family thinks this is acceptable. Find me when you decided what kind of boundaries you're willing to set. Okay. I called, texted, emailed. Nothing but brief, I need space replies. She'd moved in with her sister in Cincinnati, 2 hours away. So there I was, 36 years old, alone in an apartment I could barely afford, with nothing to show for 4 years of saving, except the knowledge that my family saw me as an ATM with a tool belt. The rent was due in 30 days. My truck needed $800 in repairs. And the only thing keeping me going was a single thought. Somehow, someway, I would get back on my feet and prove to Kate that I was worth coming back to. Little did I know, the universe was about to throw me the most unlikely lifeline from the most unexpected source. All because of one decision to be honest when dishonesty would have been easier. That lifeline I mentioned, it didn't show up right away. First came the absolute rock bottom. Have you ever tried living in a $1,200 per month apartment on your own when your budget was built for 2 incomes? It's like trying to plug a burst pipe with a Band-Aid. My savings account looked like a bad joke. $738.42 to my name. My credit card was already maxed out paying for the truck repairs. And those wedding cater deposits? Non-refundable, of course. The first few weeks after Kate left were a blur of 12-hour shifts, ramen dinners, and falling asleep to friends' reruns that only reminded me of what I'd lost. Management started noticing my zombie-like state at work. My productivity dropped. Customers complained about wait times. Then came the first written warning for messing up an oil change on a 2022 Toyota Camry. Rookie mistake that cost the shop $600. My supervisor, Dave, pulled me aside in the break room. His sympathetic expression quickly turned to shock as I explained what happened with my family. They faked a medical emergency to buy your sister a BMW? Man, that's cold. Like North Dakota in January cold. Dave hooked me up with weekend gigs at his brother's fleet garage. Extra $200 cash every Saturday rebuilding alternators for delivery vans. It helped with groceries, but barely made a dent in the bigger financial crater. Kate's texts remained brief and infrequent. Still need space. Doing okay. Hope you're too. Got transferred to Cincinnati office. Nothing about coming back. Nothing about us. Each message felt like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. I tried contacting my family exactly once. Mom answered with a cheery, "Oh, you're not still upset about that little misunderstanding, are you?" Dad didn't even come to the phone. Jen sent a selfie from her BMW with the caption, "Loving my career upgrade. Sold 3 Series 7s this month." So much for blood being thicker than water. The incident that changed everything happened on a rainy Tuesday, for weeks after what I'd started calling the Great BMW Heist. Our shop had received an older Audi A6, 2018 model silver. Beautiful condition aside from electrical issues, following what the customer claimed was just a little fender bender. The service advisor flagged it as water damage, which wouldn't be covered under warranty. Standard procedure: replace all affected modules, bill the customer's insurance, pocket the markup. When I popped the diagnostic panel, something didn't add up. The error code showed a software conflict, not water intrusion. It would take me 20 minutes to reprogram, instead of 5 hours, replacing modules at $900 each. The service advisor wasn't happy. Just write it up as water damage. Mike, customers getting reimbursed anyway. Maybe it was the stress. Maybe it was thinking about how my family had just scammed me. Whatever the reason, I refused. Not happening. I'm logging this as a software issue. You're really going to turn down an extra $2,000 for the shop because of your Boy Scout principles? Now I see why your family walked all over you. Something inside me snapped, not in a lose-my-temper way, but in a moment of perfect clarity way. Yeah, maybe that's exactly why. But at least I can sleep at night. I fixed the Audi properly, logged the actual repair, and charged accordingly. The customer saved nearly $3,000, and I figure I'd probably be updating my resume by Friday. Instead, the shop owner called me into his office Thursday morning. Great. Getting fired would be the perfect cherry on top of my disaster Sunday. His office always reminded me of a hunting lodge, mounted base on the wall, leather chairs that had seen better days, and the lingering smell of cigars that he'd supposedly quit smoking years ago. Sit down, Porter. Got something to discuss. As I sank into the creaky chair, I noticed another man in the room, tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He studied me with the intensity of someone assessing a used car for hidden problems. This is Richard Harrison, owns Harrison Automotive Group. The name clicked. 6 dealerships across 3 states, including 2 luxury brands. The kind of business empire built over decades. Richard here owns that Audi A6 you worked on Tuesday. My stomach dropped. Great. The customer was connected and angry. The job search was definitely starting today. Harrison spoke for the first time. Your service advisor suggested replacing 6 modules at nearly $6,000. You diagnosed a software conflict and fixed it for $240. Sir, the vehicle didn't have water damage. I couldn't in good conscience. He raised his hand. I know. I'm the one who instructed your service advisor to suggest the unnecessary repairs. It was a test. The room went silent, except for the ancient ceiling fan squeaking above us. A test. Harrison leaned forward. I've been looking for a technical director for my new service center. Someone who understands vehicles, but also understands integrity. Ken here says you're the best mechanic he's had in 15 years. But skill isn't my primary concern. He pulled out a folder. I've lost $84,000 this year alone to service advisors recommending unnecessary repairs. It damages our reputation and destroys customer trust. When Ken told me about a master tech who refused to pay a bill even when pressured, I had to see for myself. The shop owner looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Clearly, he wasn't thrilled about losing his best mechanic. Harrison slid a business card across the desk. I need someone to overhaul the service departments across all 6 locations. Starting salary $85,000 plus performance bonuses. Company vehicle included. I stared at the card, certain this was some elaborate, practical joke. Why me? There must be 100 techs with better qualifications. Qualifications. Harrison actually laughed. I've got ASE-certified technicians coming out of my ears. What I don't have is someone who'll stand up for what's right when it costs them. You just prove you're that person. The offer was legitimate. The salary was nearly double what I was making, and the timing couldn't have been more perfect. My rent was due in 2 days, and my checking account was showing a balance of $154.32. Still, doubt crept in. Was I qualified to direct multiple service centers? Would I be trading one problem for a bigger one? Harrison seemed to read my thoughts. Everyone feels like an imposter when opportunity knocks. Son, the question is whether you open the door anyway. I accepted the position on the spot. Life moves fast when you suddenly have direction and resources. Within 3 weeks, I had 1. Moved into a smaller but more affordable apartment closer to Harrison's flagship dealership. 2. Started paying down my credit card debt. 3. Begun rebuilding my savings account. 4. Sent Kate a brief message about the career change. She responded with congratulations. Happy for you. The job was challenging, but exactly what I needed. Harrison gave me the authority to reorganize service procedures across all locations. Some veteran service advisors resented the new guy changing their profitable systems. I didn't care. I was building something honest from the ground up. 1 month into the job, I was reviewing customer histories at the BMW dealership when a familiar name jumped off the screen. Jennifer Collins. My sister. Vehicle, 2023 BMW X3. Purchased 3 months ago. I clicked into the details. The salesperson had noted, customer used family emergency story to rush financing approval. Another note from the finance manager. Customer claimed inheritance coming to cover down payment. My blood ran cold. Not only had my sister scammed me for the BMW, but she'd also lied to the dealership about having money to cover the down payment. And now I work for that very dealership. The universe has a dark sense of humor sometimes. I closed the file without mentioning it to anyone. This was a professional position, and I needed to keep family drama separate. But knowing what I knew now gave me a strange sense of power. For the first time since the great BMW heist, I felt like I might be exactly where I needed to be. That feeling only strengthened when Harrison called me into his office again, 6 months after hiring me. Porter, remember how I found you? Testing your integrity when everyone else wanted the easy money. I nodded, wondering where this was going. Well, I've been watching you rebuild these service departments. Profits are actually up, even with the honest approach. Turns out customers appreciate not getting fleeced. He pushed a folder across his desk, much thicker than the one with my job offer. My partner Bernard is retiring, selling his 15% stake in the business. I'm looking for a new partner, not just an investor. Someone who understands cars and people. I opened the folder. The buy-in price made my eyes widen. $380,000. Sir, I appreciate the offer, but that's way beyond what I could afford. Harrison smiled that same knowing smile from our first meeting. Everyone feels like an imposter when an opportunity knocks. The question is whether you open the door anyway. $380,000. The number bounced around my head like a pinball on steroids as I drove home that night. My apartment, which had seemed like a decent downgrade 3 months ago, now felt like a reminder how far I still had to go. The same IKEA furniture Kate and I had assembled while planning our future. The same coffee maker she bought on Black Friday 2 years ago. Memories everywhere, and now this impossible opportunity dangling just out of reach. Harrison had given me 48 hours to consider the offer. His exact words were, I have another interested party if you're not. No pressure, but this train's leaving the station by Friday noon. I nearly laughed out loud. No pressure? Just casually find $380,000 by Friday? Sure thing, boss. Let me check between my couch cushions. That night, I made a spreadsheet that would have made Kate proud. My total savings after 6 months at the new job, $27,350. My available credit, roughly $12,000 across 3 cards. My 401k from previous jobs, $41,700, which I could withdraw with penalties. Total accessible funds, about $81,000, barely 21% of what I needed. Sleep didn't come easy. The ceiling fan whirred above my bed as I contemplated calling my parents. Maybe they could refinance their house? The thought made me physically ill. Even if they agreed, I'd be chaining my future to the same people who'd seen nothing wrong with stealing my wedding fund. Morning brought the wild idea of contacting Kate. Not for money. That would be absurd. But for advice. The accountant in her might see angles I was missing. My finger hovered over her contact info for a full minute before I chickened out. Our last substantive conversation had been the night my family stole our future. Coming back with, hey, need $300,000 for a business opportunity seemed tone deaf at best. Instead, I went to 3 banks. The results were exactly what you'd expect. Without collateral or a longer credit history at my income level, I might as well have been asking to borrow the moon. One loan officer actually chuckled when I mentioned the amount. "Sir, we typically require assets to secure a loan of this magnitude," the Wells Fargo representative explained with practiced patience. "Your income history at this level is only 6 months long." By Thursday afternoon, I resigned myself to declining Harrison's offer. The dream had been nice while it lasted. I'd keep my director position, continue rebuilding my savings, and maybe in 5 years I'd be ready for something like this. Life rarely gives you shortcuts. As I pulled into Harrison Automotive Group's main complex to break the news, I spotted a sleek black BMW 5 Series in the visitor spot. A woman in a designer suit was getting out, carrying a leather portfolio similar to the one Harrison had given me. The other potential investor, I assumed. Walking closer, I froze. The woman was my sister Jen. She hadn't noticed me yet. I ducked behind a concrete pillar, watching as she checked her reflection in the car window, practiced a winning smile, and strutted toward the main entrance. The same entrance she'd walked through to buy her X3 with my wedding money. My brain fired in 12 different directions at once. How did Jen know about this opportunity? Why would Harrison consider her? What bizarre cosmic joke was the universe playing on me now? I slipped into the service entrance, taking the back stairs to Harrison's office suite. His assistant waved me through. Apparently I'd been expected. Inside, Harrison was alone, reviewing documents at his massive oak desk. The wall behind him showcased photographs of him with various celebrities and politicians at charity events. The man had connections in every direction. Before I could speak, Harrison glanced up with knowing eyes. "Saw your sister in the parking lot, didn't you?" My confusion must have been evident. Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Jennifer Collins, sales manager at Prestige BMW. Applied for our partnership opportunity yesterday through Bernard's nephew, who she's apparently dating. Small world, isn't it?" The irony was so perfect it physically hurt. My sister, who'd stolen my wedding fund to buy a BMW, was now trying to become part owner of the very dealership network where I worked, using her connection to Bernard's nephew, connections that had always come so easily to her. "She doesn't know you work here, does she?" Harrison asked. I shook my head. Our paths hadn't crossed professionally yet. BMW sales and service operations were in different buildings, and I deliberately avoided that section during my audits. "Interesting," Harrison mused. "So neither of you realizes you're competing for the same opportunity." "We're not competing," I clarified. "I can't secure the funding. I was coming to decline your offer." Harrison studied me for a long moment. "Sit down, Mike. I need to tell you something about myself that might change your perspective." What followed was the most unexpected conversation of my professional life. Harrison hadn't always been the owner of a successful dealership group. 30 years ago, he was a mechanic with a drinking problem and a failing marriage. His rock bottom came when he missed his son's 5th birthday because he was passed out in a motel. His wife left him, taking their son to Chicago. He got sober, rebuilt his life, and eventually bought his first struggling dealership. 20 years later, I was ready to bring my son into the business. Had it all planned out. He'd start in sales, move to finance, eventually take over the whole operation. Know what he did instead? Harrison pointed to a framed newspaper article on his wall. It featured a younger man who resembled him, standing in front of a homeless shelter. Became a social worker. Told me he'd seen enough wealthy people in Chicago to know money doesn't buy happiness. Said he preferred making a difference in people's lives over selling luxury cars. The parallel to my situation with Jen wasn't subtle. We both had family members who'd chosen very different paths. "I was furious at first," Harrison continued. "Felt rejected, like he was judging my life's work. We barely spoke for 3 years. He pulled out another photo, more recent, showing him and his son at what looked like a shelter groundbreaking ceremony. Harrison was holding a giant check. Eventually I realized something. My son had integrity. He chose a harder path because it aligned with his values, not because it was lucrative. Now I fund his shelters, and he helps me run our dealership foundation. Different paths, same values. The connection finally clicked. That's why you hired me. And why you're offering me partnership. Harrison nodded. I've spent 6 months watching you rebuild our service departments with honesty as a foundation. You remind me of my son, choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. That's what this company needs for its future. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick document. This is a bank loan application with my personal guarantee. The bank won't lend to you on your history alone, but they'll lend to me. You'll make the payments through your profit share, which should more than cover it. I stared at the paperwork. Why would you do this? Because in 30 years of business, I've learned that finding someone with both skills and integrity is rarer than finding a unicorn in your garage. I'm not giving you anything. I'm investing in what I know will pay dividends. He slid the documents across the desk. You have until noon tomorrow. Your sister has her interview at 10. She's got investors ready to back her. The choice is still yours. That night, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in months. I called Kate. The phone rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when she answered. Mike, is everything okay? Her voice was cautious, but not cold. I hadn't planned what to say. So the truth tumbled out. Everything from the job offer to Harrison's partnership proposal to Jen's competing bid. The connection that had always existed between us took over, and I found myself asking her advice, just like old times. Kate listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. You know what the funny part is? She finally said. If your family hadn't stolen our wedding fund, you'd still be changing oil at that shop. You'd never have met Harrison. The observation hit me like a thunderbolt. She was right. The worst thing that had happened to me had inadvertently led to the best opportunity of my life. Sometimes life's like that, she continued. The worst moments lead to unexpected doors. The question is whether you're brave enough to walk through them. She sounded different, more confident, more settled. Cincinnati had been good for her. What would you do? I asked. Take the loan. Become a partner. Create the kind of business that reflects who you are, not who your family thinks you should be. The conversation shifted to her life. Her promotion at the accounting firm. Her new apartment with a view of the Ohio River. It felt good, normal even, but neither of us mentioned getting back together or what might have been. As we were about to hang up, she said something that would stick with me forever. For what it's worth, Mike, I always knew you were capable of more than you believed. I'm glad Harrison saw it too. After we disconnected, I noticed something on my dresser that I'd overlooked for months. The small brass keychain Kate had given me for Christmas, engraved with our initials and what would have been our wedding year. I'd tossed it there the day she left, unable to look at it, but unwilling to throw it away. I picked it up, running my thumb over the engraving. Then I placed it in my wallet, a reminder of what I'd lost and what I might still become. The next morning, I signed the loan documents in Harrison's office at 9:30 a.m., 30 minutes before my sister arrived for her interview. By noon, I was officially a 15% owner of Harrison Automotive Group. The email to Kate was simple. I walked through the door. Thank you for believing I could. Her response came just minutes later. Never doubted it. Congratulations, partner. That single word, partner, carried more weight than she could possibly have known. It represented everything I was trying to rebuild. In business, in life, and maybe someday in love. Becoming a partner in a multi-million-dollar automotive group doesn't magically fix your personal life. That's the first lesson I learned during those initial months. My bank account looked healthier. Sure, my business cards now read Mike Porter, Managing Partner. I drove a company-provided Audi Q7 that still smelled like new leather. But every night I returned to the same half-empty apartment, microwaved the same sad frozen dinners, and scrolled through the same old photos on my phone. The professional side flourished, though. Harrison and I expanded our electric vehicle service centers, positioning our dealerships ahead of the competition. My service department overhaul increased customer retention by 34% across all locations. The loan payments barely dented my share of the quarterly profits. On paper, my life looked like a LinkedIn success story. 3 months into the partnership, I still hadn't encountered Jen face-to-face. She'd stayed at her BMW sales manager position, apparently unaware of my connection to Harrison. Some employees surely knew both of us, but nobody had spilled the beans yet. I wasn't hiding. Exactly. Just not forcing an uncomfortable family reunion in a professional setting. That changed on a random Thursday afternoon. I was touring our BMW location, reviewing their service metrics with the department manager, when a familiar voice echoed from the customer lounge. "No, Mr. Stevenson, I assure you the delivery timeline is firm. Your X7 will arrive exactly as promised. Our ownership team is committed to customer satisfaction." I glanced through the glass partition. There she was, designer pantsuit, perfect hair, selling confidence as smoothly as she sold German engineering. Our eyes met for just a split second. Her sentence faltered ever so slightly before she recovered, turning her back to continue her sales pitch. The service manager noticed nothing. "Should we continue to the parts department, Mr. Porter?" I nodded, pretending my world hadn't just tilted sideways. By the time we finished the tour an hour later, Jen had disappeared, but a text was waiting on my phone. "We need to talk. Coffee tomorrow? Unless you're too busy being a managing partner these days." The coffee shop she chose was deliberately neutral territory, a Starbucks halfway between our respective offices. I arrived early, claiming a corner table with sight lines to the door, old habits from waiting for blind dates in college. Jen arrived precisely on time, not a minute early or late. Power move. She ordered some complicated concoction with 5 modifiers before sliding into the seat across from me. "So," she began, stirred her drink unnecessarily. "Harrison Automotive Group. That's quite a step up from changing oil." I just nodded, waiting. She'd called this meeting. After all, how long have you known Richard Harrison? Her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "About 10 months now. Started as technical director. Became partner 3 months ago." Fascinating timeline. She took a deliberate sip, almost like he was grooming you for partnership, right when Bernard decided to sell his stake. The same stake I was pursuing. And there it was, the real reason for this coffee date. Jen hadn't come to reconnect as family. She wanted to know how she'd lost out on a business opportunity. "Harrison values integrity in his organization." I replied simply, her perfectly shaped eyebrow arched. "And you're suggesting I lack integrity?" The moment stretched between us like taffy, thin and ready to snap. 1,000 responses flashed through my mind, most involving some variation of, "You stole my wedding fund for a car." But this was a professional meeting, not family therapy. "Harrison makes his own decisions about partnerships." I finally answered. "My understanding is that he had concerns about your investor group." That was partially true. Harrison had mentioned that Jen's backers had reputations for aggressive cost-cutting and quick flips for profit, not the values he wanted for his life's work. Jen stirred her coffee again, eyes narrowing. "Well, congratulations on your success, little brother. It seems you finally found your place in the world. Mom and Dad will be thrilled." The mention of our parents hung in the air like smoke. I haven't spoken to them since the incident. The incident? She actually laughed. "You mean when you helped me upgrade my career vehicle? They assumed you'd get over it by now. It was just money. Just money. $22,000. For years of saving. Our future home's down payment. Just money. It wasn't about the money, Jen. It was about the lie, the manipulation, the complete disregard for what those savings meant to me and Kate." Her expression softened almost imperceptibly. "How is Kate, anyway?" "Mom said she left you." The casual cruelty of that observation stung worse than I expected. "We're in contact again. Taking things slow." That part wasn't exactly a lie. After my partnership announcement, Kate and I had exchanged a few more substantial messages. She'd even called once to catch up. Baby steps. Jen checked her watch. Another power move. "Well, I should get back to work. Unlike some people, I don't own part of the company." As she stood to leave, I found myself asking the question that had bothered me for months. "Why did you do it, Jen? Why not just ask for a loan?" She paused, designer handbag hanging from her forearm. "Would you have given me $22,000 for a car?" "No." "Exactly. Sometimes you need to take what you need in this world. No one's going to hand it to you. With that parting philosophy, she left me sitting with my cooling coffee and a realization. My sister and I weren't just different people. We had fundamentally different views of how the world should work. 3 weeks after the coffee shop encounter, I did something I'd been putting off for months. I drove to Cincinnati to see Kate in person. We'd arranged to meet at Eden Park, overlooking the Ohio River. Neutral territory, just like with Jen, but for very different reasons. The October air carried the first hint of fall, leaves beginning their transformation into reds and golds. I spotted her on a bench near the gazebo, reading something on her iPad. Her hair was shorter now, styled differently than I remembered, professional but still soft. She looked up as I approached, her expression guarded but not unwelcoming. "You look good," she said as I sat beside her, leaving appropriate space between us. "You too. The Cincinnati air agrees with you." Small talk felt strange after 4 years together and nearly a year apart, but we pushed through it. Work updates, weather observations, safe topics that build a bridge back to something resembling comfort. Eventually, we wandered along the river path, the conversation flowing more naturally with movement. I told her about the partnership, about expanding the EV service centers, about my coffee with Jen. She shared stories about her promotion to senior accountant, her new friends at the Cincinnati office, the Riverview apartment she'd finally settled into. As we reached the scenic overlook, Kate turned to face me directly. "Why did you want to meet in person, Mike?" We could have covered all this on the phone. The moment of truth. I'd rehearsed this in my head a dozen times. But standing there with the wind ruffling her hair, all my practiced words evaporated. "I want to try again," I said simply. "Not pick up where we left off. That's impossible. But start something new, something better." Her expression didn't change. "What about your family?" "That issue hasn't disappeared. I've learned to set boundaries. I haven't spoken to my parents in almost a year. My relationship with Jen is purely professional when necessary. I built a life that's mine, not defined by their expectations or manipulations." Kate nodded slowly, considering. "And what would trying again look like exactly?" "Dinner, conversations, getting to know each other in our new lives. No pressure, no timelines, just possibility." The silence that followed felt eternal. Below us, a barge pushed slowly upriver, fighting the current with steady determination. "I can do dinner," she finally said, "one step at a time." It wasn't a dramatic reunion or a passionate embrace. No Hollywood ending. Just two people agreeing to see if something broken could be rebuilt into something new. The 3-month trial period of dating, as Kate jokingly called it, evolved naturally into something solid. Weekend visits became midweek stays. Her toothbrush reappeared in my bathroom. My favorite cereal found its way into her pantry. By spring, we were discussing whether she should transfer back to Indianapolis or I should look into expanding Harrison's operations near Cincinnati. The question resolved itself when Harrison announced plans to acquire a struggling dealership group in northern Kentucky, just across the river from Cincinnati. I volunteered to oversee the integration, which meant relocating to the area. By summer, Kate and I had found a house together in a quiet neighborhood halfway between our respective offices. Life settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and entirely new. We were more cautious this time, more deliberate in our choices. The scars from our separation had taught us both to value communication over assumption. Then came the wedding invitation. It arrived in an expensive cream envelope with gold embossing, my parents' style through and through. Inside, an equally elaborate card announced the wedding of Jennifer Collins to William Hargrove III, with a reception to follow at the Hillcrest Country Club. Most surprising was a handwritten note from my mother. "Michael, we've missed you this past year. Your success with Harrison Automotive makes us so proud. Please consider attending your sister's wedding with Caitlin. It's time to put family disagreements behind us. Love, Mom." The invitation sat on our counter for 3 days, neither of us quite ready to discuss it. Finally, over Friday night takeout, Kate broached the subject. "Are you thinking about going?" I poked at my pad thai, buying time. "Would you be comfortable going if I decided to?" She considered this carefully. I think the question is whether you're ready to reopen that door. Once you let them back in, even a little, the boundaries become harder to maintain. She was right. As usual, the invitation wasn't just about a wedding. It was about whether I was willing to reintegrate into a family dynamic that had nearly destroyed everything important to me. What would you do? I asked. Kate set down her chopsticks. I'd go, but with conditions. Clear expectations about respect, boundaries, and acknowledgement of past wrongs. No sweeping things under the rug with family disagreements. And I'd make it clear that attendance at a wedding doesn't mean everything is forgiven. Her practical approach made perfect sense. Create structure, set expectations, maintain control. I called my mother the next day and laid out exactly those terms. To my surprise, she agreed without argument. Perhaps a year of silence had actually made an impact. Or perhaps Jen's new fiancé, the son of a prominent local businessman, had impressed upon him the importance of family unity for appearances. Either way, we RSVP'd yes, booked a hotel room separate from the family block, and prepared for what would certainly be an interesting family reunion. Little did I know that the wedding would lead to yet another unexpected turn in our story, one that would bring the entire saga full circle in a way I never could have imagined. Hillcrest Country Club lived up to its reputation as the playground for Indianapolis's upper crust. Valet parking, marble fountains, and enough floor arrangements to bankrupt a small nation. As Kate and I walked into the reception hall, I couldn't help but think how different our own wedding would have been. The modest venue we'd chosen, the DIY centerpieces Kate had pinned on Pinterest, the local band we put a deposit on. The contrast wasn't lost on Kate either. She squeezed my hand as we found our assigned table, strategically placed halfway between the family section and the random work acquaintances, close enough to claim they'd included us, far enough to avoid actual conversation. My parents spotted us during cocktail hour. Mom approached first, arms extended for a hug that I awkwardly converted to a handshake. Dad hung back, nursing his scotch with the discomfort of someone who'd rather be watching football. Michael, you look so handsome. And Caitlin, that dress is lovely, Mom gushed, her country club smile firmly in place. Not a word about the elephant trampling to the champagne fountain. The $22,000 they'd helped steal from us, the year of silence, the broken trust. I maintained polite small talk, adhering to the boundaries I'd established on the phone. Yes, business was good. No, we hadn't set a new wedding date. Yes, the weather in Cincinnati was quite pleasant this time of year. The conversation remained superficial, like we were acquaintances who'd met at a business mixer rather than family. Jen made her grand entrance as a newly minted Mrs. Hargrove III in a designer gown that probably cost more than my first car. Her husband, a tall, Kennedy-esque figure with the practiced smile of someone born into money, seemed pleasant enough in that generic country club way. During the reception, I noticed Jen's new BMW X5 parked prominently near the entrance, visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The ultimate status symbol at her ultimate status event. Some things never change. The unexpected twist came during the tail end of the reception, when most guests had moved from dinner to dancing or departed altogether. I was returning from the restroom when William Hargrove II, my new brother-in-law's father, cornered me near the coat check. Mike Porter, right? You're in the automotive business. I nodded, introducing myself simply as a managing partner at an automotive group. Bill Hargrove, he introduced himself, though I knew exactly who he was. CEO of Hargrove Financial, one of the largest investment firms in the Midwest. I actually know Richard Harrison quite well. We serve on the Children's Hospital Board together. We chatted about business for a few minutes. The typical surface-level networking that happens at these events. Then his tone shifted. Funny coincidence. When Richard mentioned his new partner a few months back, he never said it was Jennifer's brother. Small world, isn't it? I maintained a neutral expression, realizing Hargrove had just connected the dots between me and Harrison. Here's something you might find interesting, he continued, lowering his voice. Jen came to me 6 months ago seeking investment for a partnership buy-in at Harrison Automotive. Said she had family backing but needed additional capital. My stomach twisted. The timing lined up perfectly with the Bernard partnership opportunity. When I asked about her automotive experience, she mentioned her brother worked somewhere in the industry, but was vague about details. She never said you were already working for Harrison, just that she had this incredible opportunity. The audacity was breathtaking. While I was scraping together funding options, my sister had been leveraging my name, without my knowledge, to secure investment for the very same opportunity. I declined, obviously. Hargrove continued. Something felt off about the proposal. Never mentioned it to William until after they were engaged, and by then it seemed like ancient history. But seeing you here, thought you should know. He excused himself to rejoin his wife, leaving me processing this revelation. Jen hadn't just competed against me for the partnership. She'd attempted to use my name to fund her bid. The betrayal had layers I hadn't even imagined. As Kate and I drove back to our hotel that night, I shared what I'd learned. Her response was measured, as always. Are you really surprised? This is consistent with everything we know about Jen. She was right. The pattern was clear. Take what you want. Use whoever you need to. Justify it later. The difference now, Kate pointed out, is that it no longer affects us. You've built something they can't touch. 3 months after the wedding, life had settled back into our new normal. Kate and I were thriving in Cincinnati. The Harrison expansion into Kentucky was exceeding projections, and my family had retreated to occasional text messages that I responded to when convenient. Then came the phone call that would bring our story full circle. It was a random Tuesday afternoon. I was reviewing quarterly service numbers when my assistant transferred a call from someone who refused to identify themselves. Mike Porter. I answered, expecting a sales pitch. Mr. Porter, you don't know me, but I'm Jason Kendrick, William Hargrove's personal assistant. An odd introduction. I waited for him to continue. I'm calling because, well, this is awkward. Your sister Jennifer is in serious financial trouble, and I thought you should know before it becomes public. According to Jason, William had discovered that Jen had maxed out multiple credit cards, taken a second mortgage on her condo without his knowledge, and borrowed against her BMW. Total debt, just over $180,000. William is considering separation, Jason explained. He's concerned about the financial liability, especially since they signed a prenup. Why are you telling me this? I asked, genuinely confused. We're not exactly close. Because she's planning to ask you for help. William overheard her telling your parents that her successful brother would bail her out. Given your history, I thought you should have some warning. After thanking him for the heads up, I sat in my office wondering what game was being played now. Was this another manipulation? A test? Or had Jen's financial house of cards finally collapsed? I didn't have to wonder long. The very next morning, she appeared in my office lobby without an appointment. The contrast with the country club Jen was stark. Designer suit replaced by jeans and a simple blouse. Perfect makeup reduced to the basics. The confidence that normally radiated from her diminished to a nervous energy. My assistant looked alarmed, but I nodded that it was okay to let her in. Jen took a seat across from my desk, her eyes taking the corner office with its view of the Ohio River. There was something different in her expression. Not quite humility, but perhaps the closest approximation she could manage. Nice place, she began awkwardly. The Cincinnati operation seemed successful. I waited, knowing this wasn't a social call. Look, I'll cut to the chase. I'm in trouble, Mike. Financial trouble. William found out about some debts I've been carrying. He's threatening divorce unless I clear everything up immediately. She explained how it started with extending herself on the condo renovation, then the designer wardrobe needed for country club events, then the vacation to keep up with William's friends. Classic lifestyle inflation, compounded by secrecy. Mom and Dad already gave me what they could, but it's nowhere near enough. I need $22,000 to cover the most pressing debts. The number couldn't have been more perfect if I'd scripted it myself. Exactly the amount they'd taken from me and Kate. Exactly the amount that had derailed our wedding, our home purchase, our future. Just to be clear, I said carefully, "You're asking me for $22,000? She nodded, looking somewhere between desperate and embarrassed. I opened my desk drawer and took out a check I prepared that morning after Jason's call. The amount, exactly $22,000. Her eyes widened in surprise. You're giving it to me? Just like that. Not giving. This is a loan with terms. I slid a simple document across the desk, a promissory note acknowledging the debt and the circumstances behind it. This states that you're borrowing $22,000 from me. It also acknowledges that this is the exact amount you and our parents fraudulently obtained from me and Kate through the fake emergency scenario. Jen's face flushed. I'm not signing something admitting to fraud. Then I'm not writing the check. Your choice. She stared at the document, then at the check, then back at me. Why are you doing this? Is it just to humiliate me? No, it's about accountability. The money isn't charity. It's a full circle moment. What was taken dishonestly is now being returned through honesty. After several minutes of internal struggle, she picked up the pen and signed. I handed her the check, which she folded carefully into her wallet. As she stood to leave, she paused. For what it's worth, I am sorry about what happened. Not just because it's biting me now, but because it was wrong. It wasn't a dramatic apology, but from Jen, acknowledging wrongdoing at all was unprecedented. One question before you go. I said, why a BMW? Why was that car so important? It was worth destroying our relationship. She thought for a moment. I thought it would make people respect me, that the right car, the right image would open doors. And it did, in a way, just not the doors that mattered. After she left, I called Kate to tell her what had happened. Her response was perfect. Well, $22,000 seems to be our magical number, doesn't it? 5 years have passed since that day in my office. The Harrison Porter Automotive Group. Yes, Harrison insisted on adding my name after I helped double the company's value. Now spans 5 states. Kate and I finally had that wedding. Smaller and more meaningful than the one we'd originally planned. Our 2-year-old daughter has her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn streak. Jen eventually divorced William, paid back my loan, and started her own image consulting business, ironically helping professionals develop authentic personal brands. My parents are cautiously back in our lives, with firmly established boundaries that they've learned not to test. Looking back on that terrible night, when my family stole our wedding fund, I'm struck by how differently everything turned out than I could have possibly imagined. The worst betrayal of my life led directly to my greatest opportunities, professionally and personally. There's a quote from my favorite author that sums it up perfectly. Sometimes the wrong train takes you to the right station. I boarded a train of betrayal and hardship, but it delivered me to a life better than the one I'd been planning. The $22,000 that was stolen from us, that number now represents something entirely different. It's the amount Kate and I donate annually to a financial literacy program for young adults. We call it the Full Circle Fund, turning what was once our greatest setback into someone else's fresh start. Life rarely travels in straight lines. Sometimes it loops back on itself, creating patterns we can only recognize in retrospect. The truly valuable things, integrity, resilience, love built on honest foundations, these can never be stolen. They can only be earned, one difficult choice at a time. And that, as it turns out, is worth far more than any BMW.